What if the real reason airlines delay you, flag you, fine you, or quietly make your trip miserable isn't written anywhere you can see? And what if one tiny, innocent mistake you make at the airport today secretly follows you for years without you ever knowing it? That question alone keeps a lot of airport insiders awake at night. Because behind the friendly smiles, the boarding music, and the glossy airline ads promising carefree travel, there's a darker, quieter system working non-stop. And as a professional travel planner, airport security consultant, and airline rules expert, I can tell you this with full confidence. Most travelers are not breaking the rules on purpose. They're breaking rules nobody ever explains. Rules that don't show up on airline websites. Rules agents won't warn you about until it's already too late. And rules that can quietly label you as a problem passenger even if you've never argued with staff, never missed a flight, and never caused trouble. Because airlines don't just track what you do wrong. They track patterns, timing, tone, hesitation, body language, booking behavior, and even how you react when nothing goes wrong at all. And that's where the dark side begins. Because the system isn't designed to educate you, it's designed to protect operations, schedules, profits, and risk, not feelings, not fairness, and definitely not transparency. So let me take you inside a real-world scenario most travelers will recognize but never fully understand. You arrive early. Everything feels calm. You check in online. You think you're doing everything right. But your bag gets pulled aside. Security asks a few extra questions. Boarding feels tense. Your seat assignment changes. And suddenly you feel watched, judged, rushed, and confused. And no one explains why. Because explaining costs time, and time is the most expensive thing in an airport. And here's the part: nobody on YouTube really explains our line rules are layered. And the top layer is what passengers see: baggage limits, ID checks, boarding times, seat policies. But beneath that are internal risk rules, operational flags, and compliance behaviors that are never written for the public. Like how often you change flights, how close to departure you book, how frequently you ask agents for exceptions, how many times your bag weight lands exactly on the limit, how you respond when told no, how you stand in line, how fast you follow instructions, and even how confidently you answer routine questions. And no, this isn't paranoia, it's logistics. Because airlines and airports run on predictive models, and those models don't care if you're a good person. They care if you slow things down, cost money, or increase uncertainty. Which is why something as simple as checking a bag at the counter when you usually don't can trigger extra scrutiny. Or why joking with a TSA officer, even harmlessly, can backfire. Because humor doesn't translate well in security environments where clarity and speed matter more than personality. And here's another uncomfortable truth. Most travelers don't realize airlines are not neutral. They remember, not emotionally, but digitally. And while they won't tell you you've been flagged, they absolutely adjust how they interact with you. Sometimes subtly, sometimes aggressively, based on prior interactions, refund requests, complaint history, chargebacks, missed connections, and even how often you call customer service, because to an airline system, frequent friction equals potential future friction. And that's why two passengers can make the same mistakes, arriving late to boarding but only one gets rebooked easily while the other gets stonewalled. Because one profile looks low risk and the other looks expensive, unpredictable, or time-consuming. And here's where most travel advice online gets it wrong. They tell you what you're allowed to do, but they don't tell you what raises silent red flags, like standing too close to the counter before being called, repeatedly checking your phone during questioning, over-explaining simple answers, or asking why too many times. Because in high-throughput environments like airports, why slows things down, and slowing things down is the ultimate sin, especially during peak travel hours. And yes, even seasoned travelers mess this up because experience can breed confidence. And confidence can look like resistance when rules change without notice. And rules do change without notice, quietly, internally, daily, sometimes hourly, based on staffing, weather, security levels, and international compliance requirements. Which is why yesterday's smooth trip means nothing today. And why arguing this didn't happen last time is one of the fastest ways to shift an agent's tone from helpful to defensive. And once that shift happens, you're no longer being helped, you're being processed. And processed passengers don't get flexibility. They get policy, rigid, cold, and final. And let's talk about fines, penalties, and fees. Because this is where the dark side really hits. Most travelers assume fines only apply to serious violations. But that's outdated thinking, because airlines and airports increasingly use financial penalties as behavioral controls, charging for seat changes, baggage adjustments, missed check-in windows, documentation issues, and non-compliance moments that aren't framed as punishments, but service fees. And the scary part is, these fees can stack fast, sometimes reaching thousands of dollars without a single dramatic mistake. Just a chain of small ones, like trusting outdated travel advice, relying on screenshots instead of live apps, assuming verbal confirmations are enough, or not realizing that international and domestic rules often conflict at connecting airports. And the reason nobody explains this clearly is simple clarity reduces revenue, and confusion creates compliance, because when travelers feel uncertain, they default to paying, agreeing, and moving on, which keeps lines moving and systems efficient. And that's the uncomfortable balance airports live in. Efficiency over education, movement over meaning. And once you understand that, a lot of confusing airport behavior suddenly makes sense. Like why signs feel vague, why announcements contradict each other, why staff say I don't make the rules, and why escalation almost never works the way movies make it seem. Because escalation triggers documentation. And documentation is never in the passenger's favor unless you are calm, concise, and cooperative. And here's something almost nobody talks about openly. Airports and airlines reward predictability, not loyalty, not politeness. Predictability, which is why a frequent flyer who constantly pushes boundaries may get less grace than an infrequent traveler who follows instructions cleanly, and why acting experienced can sometimes hurt you more than help you. Because systems expect experienced travelers to know better. And when you don't comply perfectly, the response is less forgiving. And that's also why older travelers, international travelers, and even families are sometimes treated differently. Not because of bias, but because data suggests they behave differently under stress, and systems adapt accordingly. And if this feels unsettling, that's because it is. But understanding it gives you power. Because once you see the dark side clearly, you stop fighting the system emotionally and start navigating it strategically, like knowing when to speak and when silence helps, when to accept a minor loss to avoid a major one, when to document quietly instead of arguing loudly, and when to step back and let processes finish before intervening. Because airports are not customer service environments first, they are risk management environments, and customer service is layered on top only when risk feels low. And here's a real insider truth. Most random checks are not random, they're contextual, triggered by timing, behavior, travel patterns, and system load. And while you can't control everything, you can control how you move through these spaces, because every interaction leaves a digital trace. And those traces shape future interactions more than most travelers realize. And that's why two people standing in the same line, holding the same passport, flying the same airline, can have completely different experiences. One smooth, one stressful, one feeling respected, one feeling targeted. And it's not luck. It's data meeting behavior in real time. And this is exactly why channels like Golden Age Travel Tips exist. Because most travel advice focuses on deals, hacks, and shortcuts. But the real advantage comes from understanding how the system sees you, not how you see the system. And once you understand that, you stop asking, what am I allowed to do? And start asking, what does this situation need from me right now? Which is a much more powerful question. Because the dark side of airline rules isn't about punishment. It's about control, flow, and predictability. And travelers who learn to move with that reality instead of against it travel smoother, cheaper, and with far less stress, even when things go wrong. And yes, things will always go wrong sometimes. Flights get delayed, bags get lost, rules change. But how those moments end depends less on policy and more on perception. Because in an airport, perception drives response, and response drives outcome. And here's the final suggestion I give to every traveler who wants to stay invisible in the best possible way. Slow down mentally, even when the airport is rushing you. Speak less, but more clearly. Follow instructions exactly, even when they feel unnecessary. Avoid jokes. Avoid comparisons. Avoid emotional reactions. Document quietly. Accept small inconveniences early to avoid big penalties later. And remember that the goal is not to win against airline rules. The goal is to pass through the system without becoming memorable. Because in modern air travel, being unremarkable is the smartest travel hack of all.